This beautiful boy with a silk coat participating in a training Saturday program, together with more shelter dogs and volunteers, used to look like this. And he used to live here. So did all the dogs from that day in dog training school. He used to live like this. He used to live like this. She used to live like this. And this fluffy child teddy bear used to be one of the puppies living like this. Those are 5 of the 44 dogs that were rescued by Save a Greek Stray from this concentration camp that was hosting at the time of our operation about 400 dogs. One of them was this sweet old girl I'm fostering, who in the beginning we thought she was dead as she was lying there chained and emaciated next to a dirty doghouse. And this concentration camp was what you would call a public pound. It's what the local community of Sparta, Greece, would call a shelter. Yes, this Sparta. And what any human with a minimum amount of empathy would call an ongoing crime committed basically by the state.
Ζωντανό είναι, κουνιέται.
Κουνιέται ο θώρακας.
Βρώμικα, στιβαγμένα, αποστεωμένα, ακόμη και νεκρά ζώα. Αυτές είναι οι εικόνες από τις άθλιες συνθήκες μέσα στις οποίες διαβιούν εκατοντάδες χιλιά σε 2 δημοτικά κοινοκομεία της Σπάρτης.
Στιβαγμένα, αλυσοδεμένα με ελάχιστη τροφή αλλά και νερό, υποσιτισμένα, αποστεωμένα, άρρωστα, δαγκωμένα.
On February 21st, 2022, those 400 dogs from the 2 public pounds of Sparta, Greece, made it to the 9 o'clock news. It's very rarely that animals make the news here, but this time reporters could not ignore the story that came out that Monday with a big fat bang. Garbage bins, left to starve or kill each other or succumb to disease, locked in forever, with concentration camp being inaccessible to anyone else but a couple of torturers, basically, paid by the state to essentially keep the unwanted dogs out of sight. This was the story. To understand how things got so out of hand, you must have an idea of the reality of stray dogs in Greece, and to do that, you first need to picture a country that is developing, not developed. Greece is with 1 foot to the 21st century and with 1 foot to the 1950s. That applies to everything, including pets. So on the one hand, we get the dog shows and the purebred competitions here, and people showing off their purely bred dogs that cost 5 times the average salary of an average Greek employee. And on the other hand, we get millions of strays in every single corner of the country that come from millions of unwanted births that happen per year from dogs that more or less live like this. The spectrum of what it means to own a dog is so huge here that in order to understand it, one has to experience it. TNR campaigns organized by charities are never enough, and there are no open admission shelters. In fact, every animal lover that has minimum amount of brain cells rejects the idea of a state-run open admission shelter. Because what this means for the Greek reality is not a couple of weeks of decent life for an unwanted dog before he gets a needle. No. What open admission shelter means is a slow and painful death. A death of starvation and disease among urine, feces, malted water, and constant stress barking from all around. The public pound of Sparta operated actually like an open admission shelter that just didn't euthanize. It took the dogs in and let them die slowly on their own. Monitored by no one objectively, funded by the local government and applauded by the community because the Spartans were for years some of the few citizens of Greece that got to live in stray-free streets. Countless reports had been made in the past, reports that fell on deaf ears because according to the claims of people who tried to put an end to this, The local police never intervened, the municipality answered back with ironic authoritarian insults, and the state vets that performed at least one inspection in the past found the shelter dogs to be in good health. Now, if you are Greek, you are not surprised at all the above. If you are not Greek, you might get an idea of the reality we live in here. If it sounds absurd, it's because it is. The gap between any law and the enforcement of that law is huge, and when it's the state that breaks a law, the road to bring anyone to justice is long, it is painful, and it usually leads nowhere.
Είμαι ο πληρεξούσιος δικηγόρος του Save a Greek Stray, κάτι το οποίο ξεκίνησε ως συλλογή πληροφοριών. Η εικόνα ήταν εφρικώδης και μετέβη ένα κλιμάκιο της Save a Greek Stray για να δει το ίδιο τι συμβαίνει εκεί. Και πράγματι βεβαίως δεν μπορούσε να μπει στο χώρο, ο οποίος ήταν αποκλεισμένος από κάθε πολίτη. Νομίζω είναι ακριβέστερο να διατυπωθεί ο όρος στρατόπεδα θανάτου.
That experience of joining Save a Greek Stray, those 3 days, was one I will never forget. My camera helped me filter everything I saw. I would have broken down and started crying if I hadn't been seeing and documenting everything through the lens. Somehow this helped. We saw 2 dead dogs that Sunday behind the bars and many others dying. I can't begin to describe the smell of months of feces being piled up, and I cannot describe the feeling of desperation. It now all feels like a distant dream, and that's how I cope with it. So that Sunday we just visited, documented everything and just left. Fun fact, that hellhole was right next to an organic olive grove. Remember that the next time you buy a tiny bottle of Greek organic oil that costs a fortune. Leaving unable to do anything is traumatic. But to do things right and to make sure you have the law by your side, you need to wait. So we waited, and the next day we went to the local prosecutor's office and filed a lawsuit that was 1,000 pages long. And the day after that, we were granted access. We had been waiting there outside the shelter since Tuesday morning, knowing that inside some dogs had hours to live. The police came and went, reporters came and went, the mayor came and went, and eventually we were left alone, again, waiting. Just knowing for a fact that some of the dogs in there were going through the last hours of their lives. Finally, the keys to that torture camp were brought to us in the evening by a municipal employee. The police came back, and so did the state vets. The doors opened, and for the next 5 hours we started selecting and removing the sickest of the dogs in there.
Keep on moving to the drums now, to the drums now. I'll follow your heartbeat to the ending of the ocean. I'll follow your heartbeat away, away, away. I'll follow your heartbeat away, away, away. I'll follow your heartbeat. Keep on moving to the drums now, to the drums now. I'll follow your heartbeat to the ending of the ocean. I'll follow your heartbeat away, away, away. I'll follow your heartbeat away, away, away.
We left that evening with 44 dogs that were on the brink of death. Dogs that had gone through hell. Some barely made the trip alive. And in the next days, we would count the losses, wipe our tears, and focus on the ones remaining and fighting for a chance of a better life. It's been 6 months now, and the ones that we managed to rescue in time have recovered. Some have been adopted, and some are still waiting. They are of all sizes and ages and personalities. Whatever that experience was for them, it didn't change the core of who they are. And this is amazing. Most of them are social with people and with dogs. Some are more dominant, some more submissive, some behave as if nothing ever happened to them. They came in fresh and happy from the first day. I can go on and on about all those dogs. For each and every one of them, I could write an entire book. But the point of this video is not to tell individual stories. The point is... I'm not sure what the point is. The whole Sparta experience was many stories in one, many different things gone wrong and many lessons to be learned. The balance between the responsibility of the state and the trust we put in the state to do what's right, especially when it comes to living beings, is a very, very delicate one. Having the entirety of animal welfare rely on the volunteer work of citizens feels wrong, but having it rely entirely on the state feels even more wrong. And apart from wrong, it feels dangerous, especially in a country like Greece. And the collaboration between the two is not an easy thing. It's cases like these that make the volunteers and every single citizen completely distrust the government and any authority whatsoever, and especially in Greece, this mistrust runs deep and it's filled with rage. And how could it not? If you're left with endless questions after this video, the correct answer to most of them is probably because they can. They stands for anyone involved. The state, the local authority, the police, the state vets, the vast majority of the citizens of Sparta, the people who own the olive groves around the shelter, the system itself. Ours was a major operation, very carefully planned and almost perfectly executed. We did it. We opened the gates of hell, rescued the ones that needed it the most. And the dogs that are left behind are now in the care of the local volunteers, not the local authorities. They are clean, they are healthy, they are being promoted for adoption, and they are better off. Many charities from all over the country took in several dogs from there too, in an attempt to lighten the burden of the volunteers left with about 350 dogs to care for. A good thing happened, but it was just that. One good thing. This is not the only public pound of Greece that breaks every ethical rule there is when it comes to animals. There are several. This was just the worst. And I'm not sure that this story will even help things change. In fact, I'm pretty sure it won't. The whole experience in Sparta left me personally with more questions than answers. And the biggest question of all is if we are capable, us humans, as a species, to do what is ethically right when no one is watching, and when it concerns something that does not have immediate effect on us. Keeping the streets clean of unwanted dogs is something that benefits us, and in Sparta they did that. But ensuring the well-being of these unwanted dogs does not seem to really benefit the human society immediately in a practical way, so why bother? And this is the frame of mind of the people involved in such cases. Why bother if it doesn't benefit me, practically, financially, and as immediately as possible? As I'm sitting here narrating, this old girl I'm fostering is lying right beside me. She never leaves my side. She's delicate, she's elderly, she struggles with incontinence, she's full of various tumors all over her body. I spent time and I spent money on her. Practically, she has nothing to offer me. What she gives back cannot be measured in tangible things that I can explain in a statistical graph. What she gives back is something very emotional and very vague. And to me, that's priceless. But when the state cares for something, that something cannot give back emotional and vague benefits. You cannot convince any government to care for unwanted dogs because it's good for the soul. And that's a deep problem in understanding between the two parties that are responsible for dogs like her, and that basically speak two different languages.